We handle about 300,000 pounds of tomatoes. With the tariffs going on right now, we kind of don't know where we're going to be.
There's been loopholes that the Mexican tomato producers have taken advantage of and continue to price dump or lower the prices below the cost of production here in the United States and in Alabama.
If they send the tomatoes over and it's supposed to be a set price and they need to move tomatoes, well, they may just give a load of bell pepper for free for them to take the tomatoes. So it's never really worked.
But it is about to shake up the entire food market in the U.S., and hardly anyone is talking about it. After a sudden move by Mexico, America's billion-dollar tomato industry just lost its main supplier. And Canada, they wasted no time stepping in. Prices are climbing. The supply chain is wobbling. And in just a few weeks, that salsa you eat with nachos might cost you nearly twice as much. So what is going on, and why could this hit your grocery bill right in the wallet? On July 14th, the U.S. Department of Commerce officially pulled out of the tomato suspension agreement that had been in place since 2019 and slapped a 17% anti-dumping tariff on all fresh tomatoes imported from Mexico. It was an unexpected decision and a big one, since Mexico currently supplies around 70% of all fresh tomatoes sold in the U.S., which adds up to over $3 billion in exports each year. Large producers like Nature Sweet say they will have no choice but to raise retail prices by about 10% to make up for the new tax, and in the end, it is consumers who will have to foot the bill. In other words, if you bought a pack of cherry tomatoes from Mexico for $4 at Whole Foods last week, next week you might be paying close to $4.40, and that increase will ripple through to everything from salads and burgers to pizza and spaghetti sauce. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, the new tariff is expected to cause Mexican tomato exports to the U.S. to drop by at least 5% in 2025. That might not sound like much, but we are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars and the livelihoods of nearly 500,000 workers in Mexico's agricultural supply chain. In the state of Sinaloa, often called the California of Mexico for its massive tomato output, many farms have already begun scaling back operations out of fear of losing big U.S. orders. Meanwhile, over at the U.S. border, importers in Texas, especially around the Laredo area, which used to generate over $8.3 billion and 32,000 jobs through agricultural trade, are scrambling to find alternative sources. If this trend continues, thousands of small businesses and food distributors across the region could be seriously affected. Just days after the new tariff took effect, tomato prices in major cities like Raleigh, Los Angeles, and Chicago began rising quickly, all within less than 2 weeks. With Mexico accounting for 70% of America's fresh tomato supply, the supply chain has taken a hit. From salads at fast food joints to salsa in Mexican restaurants, even the ketchup on your burger could see changes. Some big-name brands like Heinz and DiGiorno are now looking into switching to tomatoes grown in the US or Canada. But domestic production simply cannot fill the gap, at least not anytime soon. The result? Smaller restaurant chains, local grocery stores, and even school cafeterias, all working with tight budgets, are being forced to cut portions, raise prices, or switch to alternative ingredients with just one tariff decision. A domino effect is now spreading through America's entire food ecosystem, and this may just be the beginning.
The new spending law changes how Americans pay for education at every level. One provision affects school vouchers with a possible ripple effect on public school funding. Another targets large university endowments, bringing a new tax reality to higher education.
You might get a few $100s back for giving to charity, but you could also lose thousands if your child is aiming for a top university. Trump's new tax law is changing how we fund both education and our communities. The real question is, who stands to benefit and who could be left behind? Starting in 2027, the One Big Beautiful Bill introduces a dollar-for-dollar tax credit up to $1,700 a year for donations to K-12 private school scholarship programs. This replaces the old system of regular deductions. With no federal cap on the total credits available, some experts estimate the government could end up covering as much as $100 billion annually. For families with no children in private school, this means public school funding may take a hit, especially in programs supporting students with disabilities. For example, if a student needs an aide at $20 per hour, budget cuts might reduce that support, directly affecting the classroom learning experience. Also in 2020, universities with large endowments will face higher taxes under the new law. Schools holding more than $750,000 per student in endowment funds will pay a 4% tax. Those with over $2 million per student will pay 8%, a sharp increase from the current 1.4%. However, colleges with fewer than 3,000 tuition-paying students, like Amherst or Wellesley, are exempt no matter how large their endowment. For top universities like Harvard, with an endowment over $50 billion, the new law could cost $200 to $280 million a year, enough to fund hundreds of scholarships or entire research programs. Even schools like Rice University expect to pay more than $10 million annually, roughly the value of 100 full scholarships. To adapt, many universities have started freezing hiring, delaying raises, and slowing student enrollment growth. Families sending students to top-tier schools may notice tighter financial aid, fewer scholarships, and less generous tuition offsets. If you're planning for an Ivy League education, you might need to budget several $1,000s more per year than previous classes did. Beginning in 2026, the law also introduces a charitable deduction for non-itemizers up to $1,000 for individuals and $2,000 for couples. For the first time, over 90% of Americans who use the standard tax form will be eligible for this kind of deduction. That means if you normally give $500 to charity but don't itemize your taxes, you can still reduce your taxable income by $500 and possibly get $50 to $100 back at tax time. It's a practical way to reward everyday generosity. But wealthier donors and businesses face tighter limits. High-income individuals can only deduct up to 35% of their adjusted gross income AGI and must subtract 0.5% AGI from their donation total. For businesses, the reduction is 1% of AGI. Experts estimate this could reduce large-scale charitable giving by about $81 billion over the next decade. If you've noticed major donations from big companies or wealthy individuals to museums, arts programs, or research institutions, those contributions may become less frequent. This could leave some of those organizations needing to pause or revise plans if they cannot find replacement funding.
How can we find a way to support each other, and then in addition to that, find a way to get to new markets?
Did you know that the Ford you're driving or the dishwasher you're planning to buy next month might no longer be made in the US? It didn't take a major blow from a foreign competitor. America is weakening its own manufacturing base as more and more major companies quietly move operations north, choosing Canada as their new home. In just the past 18 months, more than $7.2 billion in investment from major players like GM, Ford, Tesla, and Alcoa has quietly flowed into Canada. It's not about cheaper labor, it's about lower total costs. In Canada, industrial electricity runs around 6 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour, about 45% cheaper than in US manufacturing states like Ohio or Michigan. Add to that, the faster approvals getting a factory built in Canada takes months, not years like it often does in the US, especially for industries like clean energy or battery production. One example, Honda is planning a 15 billion Canadian dollars, about 11 billion US dollars, electric vehicle and battery complex in Ontario, backed by major funding from both the Canadian federal and provincial governments. Earlier, Stellantis, which owns Chrysler, secured over 1 billion Canadian dollars for its battery plant in Windsor. So what does that mean for everyday Americans? It's simple. Jobs that might have landed in Michigan or Georgia are now heading to Canada. Each complex like Honda's can mean 3,000 to 4,000 jobs, gone from the US, not just factory jobs, but construction work, parts suppliers, and shipping and logistics roles. If you live in a town that's long relied on industry like Toledo, OH or Flint, MI losing a plant might mean fewer diners staying open, daycares shutting down early, or even local home prices falling because no one's moving in anymore. The US decision to raise steel tariffs to 50% has already triggered a real spike in material costs. Right after President Trump's announcement, Hot rolled coil HRC, a core material for many industries, jumped about 6%, or $240 per ton. Aluminum, used in everything from food packaging to cars and electronics, shot past $1,279 per ton, up over 20% since January. For automakers, that's painful. A pickup truck like the Ford F-150 or Chevy Silverado now costs nearly $5,700 more in materials alone without any extra bells or whistles. If you were planning to buy a truck for around $45,000, that price could easily cross $50,000. And it's not because the vehicle got better, it's just the taxes. And it's not just about price tags, it's about jobs. In places like Ohio, Michigan, and Georgia, factories are getting fewer orders because they can't compete with Canada's lower costs. Some Georgia plants have gone from 3 shifts to just 1. And reports show over 3,500 workers have either been furloughed or laid off in just the last 6 months. For the rest of us, it shows up in rising prices on anything that uses metal, from soda cans to fridges to washing machines. That $799 dishwasher you were eyeing. Next month, it might cost $850 to $875, simply because of tariffs and more expensive raw materials. While the U.S. wrestles with rising tariffs and shifting investment, Canada is stepping up fast, becoming North America's new high-tech hub. Provinces like Ontario and Quebec are now being called Battery Valley, with massive projects in EV batteries, clean energy, and electronic components taking root. Swedish firm Northvolt is investing $5.2 billion in a mega battery plant in Quebec, expected to create 3,000 to 6,000 skilled jobs. According to Economic Minister Pierre Fitzgibbon, they're tapping into Canada's low-cost hydroelectric grid and government incentives that include extended tax breaks and easier approval processes for key materials like nickel and lithium. Both crucial for battery manufacturing, Canada's strategy is about more than foreign money. They're building a fully domestic supply chain, from mining and refining to assembly and recycling. That gives them protection from fragile global supply lines and an edge when dealing with carbon regulations from the US and Europe. As companies shift north, skilled American workers, especially in tech, engineering, and battery systems, face fewer opportunities. And the price of American-made goods may keep rising if we end up importing parts from Canada at higher costs. So if you're wondering why job listings in your town are drying up, or why your next microwave is $40 more than the last one, you might just need to look a few hundred miles north.
There is still a long way to go to make up for the lost revenue that isn't going to the United States. And obviously some of that is also going internally in Canada, but it doesn't compare to the trading partner that we did have that no longer exists in that same sort of reliable sense.
Imagine this. Your favorite neighborhood shop suddenly stops accepting dollars and only takes euros or yen. Sounds ridiculous, but that's exactly what's starting to happen in the world of North American finance, and Industry Canada is quietly redrawing the economic map. And American businesses may soon have to catch up or lose out. It's a quiet summer afternoon in suburban America. Many are reviewing their retirement statements, wondering if their savings will last. Yet north of the border, things are shifting. In June 2025, Ontario issued $2 billion in bonds without any U.S. bank involvement, a first in over a decade. 3 months earlier, Alberta raised 1.25 billion euros, led by European and Canadian banks. For Americans whose retirement savings rely on pension funds, this may seem remote, but as Canadian bond deals increasingly bypass U.S. banks, pension portfolio growth could slow. Experts warn that if underwriting revenue drops 15 to 20% annually, average returns on some U.S. retirement accounts may fall by 0 to 2 to 0.3 points. For someone with $300,000 saved, that's $600 to $900 less income per year, enough to affect essentials like healthcare or groceries. For years, Canadian copper has quietly supplied nearly 1/5 of America's refined copper. Now, as Ottawa pushes back against new U.S. tariffs, that supply chain feels more fragile than ever. Auto factories in Michigan and housing projects in Texas, places powered by middle-aged workers, may soon scramble for copper. In the next 6 months, deliveries to U.S. plants could fall by up to 5,000 tons. A veteran Detroit engineer, almost 50, sums it up. We used to wait a couple weeks for copper. Now, it could be a month or more. Delays and postponed paychecks may not make headlines, but they're real for thousands of families. Decisions in boardrooms and courtrooms echo through lunchrooms and living rooms nationwide. Every electric car contains nearly 80 kilograms of copper, a quiet force driving commutes and hopes for a greener future, especially for budget-conscious middle-aged families. A 5-cent increase per pound adds $90 to each new car. With tens of thousands produced monthly, that's millions in extra costs. Upgrading a single mile of high-voltage line now takes 10 more tons of copper, adding hundreds of thousands to big utility projects. For families, these costs hit home. Utility bills are set to rise $20 to $25 per household this summer. It's hard to save when everything keeps costing more, sighs one father. All these increases add up, making an electric car, or just a cool home in July, feel less attainable than ever. A clear warning. If the US doesn't back down by July 22, Canada will impose tariffs on 125 billion Canadian dollars of American goods, from medicine and smartphones to groceries. The numbers are telling. In one quarter, Canadian exports to the US fell by 18,000 tons, while shipments to Asia soared. For middle-aged Americans, especially those juggling healthcare and family bills, the impact will come fast. Prescription drugs from Canada could rise $8 to $10 per box. Smartphones may cost $50 to $70 more, and grocery prices may quietly creep up. Analysts warn these tariffs could threaten at least 15,000 American manufacturing jobs by year's end. Sometimes, what we count on most reminds us how fragile certainty is.
With the looming threat of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs, a Buy Canadian movement has picked up across the country. You may have noticed it when you go into grocery stores or supply shops, a tag that tells you if the product you're about to pick up is made in Canada.
What if a simple change in consumer habits led to billions of dollars shifting hands between two close neighbors? If Canadian families suddenly stopped buying 6 everyday American products, would American companies even notice at first? Or would the real shock come months later, as lost sales ripple through factories, small towns, and even online platforms? Imagine how daily routines in both countries might quietly transform if trusted brands slowly vanished from shopping carts. For many years, Americans saw Canada as a reliable partner in trade and daily life. But recently, as U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, energy, and autos reached new highs, Canadians have responded in a quietly powerful way. Not with protests, but by simply turning away from certain U.S. products. 6 brands stand out: peanut butter, Harley-Davidson motorcycles, Amazon, Netflix, Walmart house brands, and cars from Ford and GM. This is no longer just an economic move. It has become a cultural statement. We don't support a nation that punishes us. This shift began in the spring of 2025, and by summer, the effect was visible in store aisles across Ontario and British Columbia. For American workers, especially those in manufacturing and retail, each unsold jar or canceled order represents a lost hour of work. If the boycott continues, annual losses for you aside, companies could exceed $2 billion USD, putting pressure on jobs from the factory floor to logistics and marketing teams. Peanut butter, once a pantry staple, tells a striking story. Sales of Jif and Skippy, 2 iconic American brands, dropped 34% in just one quarter across Canada. Supermarkets have quickly replaced them with local alternatives like Kraft Canada and Nuts to You. Even Walmart, the retail giant, has found its U.S. made goods left untouched, as Canadian shoppers favor local products or brands from other countries. The message is clear for American producers and investors. Brand loyalty can vanish quickly when national pride is at stake. The ripple effect extends to farmers supplying peanuts, workers in packaging plants, and truck drivers moving goods north. If this trend continues, the U.S. peanut industry alone could see export revenues shrink by up to 150 million USD per year. Amazon's Canadian operation took a direct hit. In early July 2025, Amazon suspended services in Quebec, leading to around 700 job losses. While some customers shifted to Canadian platforms or European tech providers, the trust gap grew. Netflix, another household name, also saw subscription numbers fall, as families questioned supporting a U.S. brand in times of economic tension. The tech sector, often seen as immune to politics, is now facing unexpected headwinds. Investors and workers, from software developers to warehouse staff, could see income growth stall. Projections suggest U.S. e-commerce and streaming exports to Canada may drop by up to 500 million USD this year if consumer confidence does not rebound. Perhaps the most visible shift is in the auto market. After Canada imposed a 25% tariff on U.S. made cars in response to the Trump administration's moves. Showroom traffic for Ford and GM sharply declined. Online searches for these brands in Canada plummeted, while orders were canceled and lots stood empty. Canadian drivers quickly switched to Korean and Japanese models like Hyundai, Toyota, and Honda. For small-town dealerships in Michigan and Ohio, every unsold car means tighter budgets and fewer jobs. Industry forecasts indicate U.S. auto exports to Canada could fall by over $2 billion USD in 2025, a sobering figure for anyone whose paycheck depends on cross-border sales.
I think fear of border patrol situation is definitely deterring a lot of tourists.
It's not just tourists who've disappeared, so has our revenue. Just weeks into 2025, thousands fewer cars and shoppers are crossing the US-Canada border, and communities from Buffalo to Niagara are feeling the shockwaves. Lost jobs, shrinking sales, and rising costs for families. There was a time when a quick trip over the Peace Bridge was just part of daily life for folks living along the border. But this February and March, more than 35,000 fewer vehicles crossed at Buffalo's Peace Bridge, and nearly 30,000 fewer crossed the Rainbow Bridge. Compared to last year, you don't need a spreadsheet to feel the change. Local diners are quieter, and shopkeepers see fewer faces each week. Erie County's tax revenue is already down 7%, forcing town halls into tough decisions. Cut clinic budgets, delay road repairs, or reduce police overtime. For homeowners and retirees, these aren't just numbers. They mean the library closes early or doctor visits take longer. As funds tighten, families feel it at the register. Groceries and gas rise maybe $10 or $15 more a month. But enough to notice, small businesses quietly let part-time staff go, hoping for a rebound before summer. It's a chain reaction, started by fewer cars on the bridge. Felt right at home. Not long ago, American brands filled Canadian homes from cereal to kitchen gadgets. Now, with 78% of Canadians vowing to buy local and 59% avoiding US products, a new attitude is emerging. It's more than patriotism, even Amazon feels it, as 41% consider leaving the platform. For middle-aged Americans with Canadian ties, the effects are clear. Returns from Canada are falling. Savings buy less, and shopping habits must adjust. Back home, this means prices for some American staples are up 3 to 5% as brands try to offset Canadian losses. So expect to pay a few dollars more for things like paper towels or coffee. E-commerce firms could see $20 to $30 million less revenue next quarter. Ultimately, it's not just politics, it's a new kind of squeeze at the store. Remember when border towns buzzed with Canadians? And every fast food spot filled up after hockey games or shopping sprees. This year, it's quieter McDonald's, Wendy's, and Burger King say they've lost hundreds of millions, mostly from Canadians staying home. For middle-aged managers and franchise owners, empty dining rooms mean tough choices. Many are cutting shifts. Some staff lose hours entirely. Families depending on those paychecks now face new worries. Staffing costs are down 10 to 15%, so each location might cut 3 to 5 jobs just to survive. Losing work at a burger joint isn't headline news. But for those in their 40s and 50s balancing bills and tuition, it's a serious hit. The golden arches remain, but business is far from booming. Canadians have long visited the US for concerts, holidays, and shopping, but this February, travel plunged. Air arrivals fell 13%. Land visits dropped 23%. The impact? Roughly $2 billion lost revenue and 14,000 jobs, mainly in hotels, restaurants, theaters, and campus roles. For tourism workers, it's more than a quarterly figure. It can mean making or missing the mortgage. Businesses report monthly losses of $150 to $200 and are cutting 10 to 15, mostly part-time or seasonal jobs. For families relying on those paychecks, the downturn hits home, showing that when Canadians stay away, U.S. Main Streets feel it, too.
Well, one gets up in the morning and you get up with fear because many of us can leave our house and we probably won't come back.
Changing course for the American food supply. Your local supermarket's bread shelf is suddenly stacked with loaves from Canada and cans of corn stamped product of Brazil. Sounds strange, but that's exactly what's happening across America's heartland. As U.S. farms slow down and shoppers face higher prices and fewer choices. Peon. Empty fields in Nebraska. There was a time when bread was a simple comfort, a warm loaf at dinner, a staple for busy mornings or late snacks. But this year in Nebraska, wheat fields are increasingly left empty, with wheat prices at a 5-year low of $5 per bushel and exports down $350 million this quarter. Unsold U.S. wheat is piling up. Even Canadian supermarkets now avoid product of U.S., leaving shelves short on basics like bread. For middle-aged families and retirees, each grocery trip brings new worries. Fewer choices, less freshness, and the uneasy sense that bread is slipping out of reach. As more land lies unused, supplies shrink. The facts are stark. Bread and bakery prices are set to rise 15%, adding $30 a month for families trying to keep their kitchens stocked. Even familiar foods can become precious. One policy change can be felt in every slice. Not long ago, California's fields fed millions with fresh greens. Now, a different scene. Produce wilting on the vine and harvest crews gone. Migrant worker visas have dropped 12%. Logistics costs are up 18%. And crops are left to rot. Texas floods and disaster response budget cuts make things worse. For retirees and families, finding vegetables can mean a 30-mile drive for lettuce or tomatoes. Each mile and dollar adds to the frustration. Soon, local produce prices may jump 20%, raising a typical family's weekly grocery bill by $25. That crisp salad now costs more and feels bittersweet, knowing how much is wasted. When American farms slow down, shockwaves ripple through the food chain. Processing plants and storage sites from Idaho to Kansas now run at half speed, and thousands of logistics and packaging workers are losing shifts. At the center is milk, a staple for families each morning. Small diners and markets, pressured by rising costs. Pass increases to customers. Bread and dairy prices have jumped 15%, costing households about $30 more monthly just for milk. Behind each gallon is more than a price. Small food businesses now spend $50 extra a month on logistics and packaging, while families see an extra $5 to $10 weekly on groceries. For many, pouring a glass of milk now feels more careful, more precious. Walk down a supermarket aisle in the Midwest these days and you might spot a quiet change. Canned corn from Brazil, filling in where American brands once stood, as Canada steps up agricultural exports. More than 1,500 containers of U.S. corn and soy have been rejected overseas this year, while Canadian funds are buying up tens of thousands of acres of U.S. farmland. For American families, especially those in their 40s and 50s, this is more than just a label change. The cost of staple foods, like canned corn, is now edging higher. Experts estimate an extra $50 a year just for basics. Not yet, the price isn't the only thing on their minds. There's a growing sense that the story behind their food is shifting, and that the future of the American harvest is suddenly less certain than ever before.